What is up? How you doing? Tell you what, I am so glad that you decided to download this podcast, put it in your ear, and join me today because you are going to be encouraged by today's discussion. Actually, I shouldn't call it a discussion because it's just me. I'll just pretend that you and I are sitting across the table from each other at a coffee house. That's like one of my favorite places to go and talk to people. I love coffee. I love tea. I love sitting and chatting with people one-on-one. So right now, I am envisioning you, my listener, across the table from me. As always, I just want to say thank you for supporting this podcast. Thank you for leaving reviews. We are getting messages now on the daily about this podcast, and I know that we are not putting out episodes as frequently as we would like to, but my good man, Eddie, has tasked me with being more diligent now that the book is done being written, that we can now start to podcast on a weekly basis. So I'm not making any promises right now, but I will tell you these episodes are going to start rolling out more frequently, and we do already have 3 guests lined up in the next 3 weeks. So I'm really excited about that. As always, this podcast is brought to you by the Sally McRae Strength app, which if you are a part of, thank you so much for joining the community. If you are curious about it, or maybe you're a new listener today, so welcome if you are. Great to have you. The Sally McRae Strength app, go ahead and click on the link here in the show notes. You can try it out for free for a week. No strings attached. And even if you were to sign up for the year or a monthly contract, you can cancel at any time. No penalties, no anything like that. The year program comes out to about 27 cents a day or $8.50 a month, which I highly recommend because what you're going to find in this app is not only hundreds of my personally crafted workouts. There are 3 follow-along programs, a 4-week, a 6-week, and then a 50K training program. We are working on more training programs, and we are working on a 6 and 8-week follow-along running and strength program, some new ones that are going to be rolling out this year. So in addition to that, I do have a mental training series in there. There's mobility, there is recovery, there is stretching, there's a strong knees program. There is specific workouts for ultra athletes, for those of you that like to run ultras. Lots of good stuff, but you also have access to hundreds of other trainers. That's the cool thing about this app. So if you're into yoga, Pilates, CrossFit, handstands, there's also nutrition, sleep, lots of other good features in the app. And it's just, it definitely is worth the investment, especially if you have ever wanted a coach, or maybe you just don't have the finances to hire a monthly coach, or you just need something to keep your workout spicy. Download the app. And I'll tell you what, if you download the app and then join the Sally McRae Strength community on Facebook, you are going to join thousands of other people just like you who are working towards their goal and encouraging each other every single day. It's the strongest community around, and I hope to see you there. All right. So today's podcast episode is titled A Stronger Way to Train. Now, this episode is brought to you by the thousands, and yes, thousands of people who have connected with me either face-to-face or across social media from all over the world about their training in the past couple decades. So I've been doing this for a long time. And there is a very common discussion that I have with people, but I'm not talking about just the general topic of training. I'm talking about the ongoing question and frustration that people feel when they ask me, am I training right? How do I know if I'm doing this right? Or so-and-so said that I need to do this, or that I'm doing this wrong. Now, before I dive into this topic, I have to acknowledge the new listeners here, people who maybe know very little about me and who might need a little insight on the ground from which I speak. So let me just let me just do a little brief introduction. I've been a competitive athlete for most of my life, close to 30 years. And when I say competitive, I'm talking about the year I chose to cross over from recreational athlete to laser focused athlete with goals, specific training, and consistent competition. So at 14 years old, I was very serious about getting a soccer scholarship and becoming the first person in my family to go to college. Now, during this time, this is like in the 90s, women's soccer was exploding in the United States. Stars like Mia Hamm, Brandi Chastain, and Michelle Akers were my heroes. I was obsessed with the pursuit of becoming a professional soccer player. From the time I was 14 to today, so I'm 43 years old now, I have never stopped training. Now, when I had my kids, which resulted in 2 fairly traumatic emergency C-sections, and those stories are for another podcast, I did take the time to recover, of course, from those surgeries, and I slowly built my body back up each time to competitive shape. So my children have essentially watched me, they've joined me, and they've learned how to train because it's all they've known. And they're 2 incredible athletes themselves. So, and again, that will also be another podcast. We'll talk about that. But my journey as an athlete has included 10 years as a gymnast, 18 years as a soccer player, and also running races and cross country, track and field. I was a sprinter in high school, and now as a mountain and ultra runner. Since the time I was 7 years old, I've been running. Additionally, I started lifting weights around 15 or 16 years old, and I've never stopped. I lift year-round, both in and out of racing season. Now, when I was 14 years old, I started coaching at soccer camps. And when I was 22, I became a high school soccer coach. At 26 years old, I began the journey of getting my personal training, group training, and strength training certifications. And at 27, I opened my own fitness and running business. So for 17 years, I have trained both youth and adults in running, strength training, running biomechanics, injury prevention, and mental toughness. By the time I was 34, I started to get invited to do special event coaching. I was kind of sought out to do private coaching for corporate groups, sports teams. I was guest speaking for events. I visited high schools and colleges as a guest speaker, both in the motivational area, but also to coach events. At 36 years old, I started coaching for Nike, both for live events, VIP events, races, and you can also find me on the Nike Run Club app. A few years after that, I was asked to be a trainer for iFit. So you can find a lot of my workouts on Nordic Track treadmills or the iFit app, as well as on Coros, the watch. They have an app and some of my workouts are in there as well. So I've spoken on panels, podcasts. I've been interviewed all over the world about my coaching and personal training tactics. And I must admit, they aren't always conventional. When I launched my app in the middle of 2021, the community of users quickly grew to the thousands. And the number one feedback we consistently receive is, I feel stronger and more confident because of your program. So we've seen hundreds of people send back reviews after setting personal bests or finishing their first race after using the run and strength programs that I have developed over the decades. Now, I'm going to pause here because it's important that you know this is definitely not a commercial for my app, even though I'd love for you to use it. What I'm trying to make clear here is that the topic I'm about to discuss is not one I take lightly. I'm not an influencer who decided to suddenly become a coach. I see this a lot. You know, influencers maybe will copy other people's hard work or stuff from books or training plans, and then they market them on their accounts as their own. You know, I've worked extremely hard to get to where I am today, and I've invested hundreds of thousands of hours listening to people, taking courses, studying, experimenting, coaching, failing, restarting, and building a business that is very real. One of the more detrimental tactics that I'm noticing in my field is how easy it is to appear to be an expert on social media without having put in real work. Today, you can run 1 or 2 ultra marathons and suddenly you're an expert coach. You can lift weights and look good in your tights and suddenly you're a personal trainer. In addition to all of that, I see that even great coaches and athletes who are looking to grow their audience or sell their products have started to use their platforms to criticize and put down other coaches and athletes for how they train as a way to elevate themselves. And that's just not necessary. Now, remember when I started this conversation and I shared a little bit about my background. Now, I wasn't doing that to prove that I'm better than anyone else, but to tell you that even with my 30 years experience in training, coaching, and competing as a professional athlete, I do not believe that there is a perfect way to train. I also don't think that I have the right to tell the masses that unless they follow my way of goal chasing and structuring training plans, that they are wrong. I don't have all the answers. I don't think I'm the best. I believe I have a lot to learn, and I believe I need to keep researching, I need to keep listening, I need to keep experimenting. I do not like when people use their platforms to deceive, oppress, or criticize others. And so I'm speaking up today because I believe we all need a good word about our personal training. Ultimately, I structured this podcast to encourage you in your training and how you structure your life as a whole. Ultimately, I hope you finish listening to what I have to say and you are encouraged, you're empowered, and you're just more discerning of your own one unique journey. There isn't a best or perfect way to train, but today's episode is a stronger way to train. And that's going to be a constant reminder throughout the talk. You don't need a perfect plan, but you need a strong plan. And a strong plan thoughtfully considers you uniquely. So let's dive in, my friend. I'm picturing you running. I'm picturing you on a bike, driving, moving around your house. I'm picturing you man, woman, young, old, with all the hundreds of variables that make you and your life unique. Now, whenever I begin working with an athlete, I interview them. And my interview can last anywhere between 30 and 60 minutes for one athlete. Do you know why I, as the coach, interview people? Because no 2 lives are the same. Even if I had 50 people in one room who all had the same goal of running a sub 3-hour marathon, each of their training plans would be different. Customized training plans place the individual with all their variables at the forefront of the plan, not the other way around. When you download a training plan online, for example, which there's a lot of awesome training plans that you can use as a guide that are free online. You can go on and download them. I did that at the beginning of my journey. I would find all the training plans I could and see what was out there. What's important for you to remember is that when the plan was created, you were never in mind. You and your fitness level, your career, your family, your school schedule, history of injuries, your training age, your athletic background, your biological age, your sleep, your stress level, and your goals were never factored into that plan. It's just a blind skeleton of a training plan. So here is my first point in helping you discern the often loud and confusing conversations about who is training right or who is doing it wrong. Does the training hold you and all your variables in mind? If not, then you can graciously release yourself from feeling wrong or feeling like you're lesser in your training because it doesn't match what this coach or this athlete is saying. In relating to this point, I want to share a very precious personal story. After I had my second child, my son, Isaiah, I was still very focused on fitness, training, and this now buried dream of becoming a professional athlete. My soccer days were over, but I continued training 2 times a day because I believed that was what I was supposed to do. From the time I was a little girl, I knew and believed that I would one day be a pro athlete. Now, that's a story for another day, but at this time when my kids were babies, I discovered ultras and began training for my first 50-mile race, which was American River 50, which was to be held in April of 2010. So at this time, it was 2009 when I first started training for it. I scoured the internet, bookshelves, chat rooms for any information on how to train for these still fairly mysterious, oddly monstrous races. How long was I supposed to run each week? Should I do speed training? What about cross training, weightlifting? How long were my long runs supposed to be? What I found was confusing. Some plans only had me running far on the weekends and running just 4 or 5 miles each day during the week. Less than what I was doing training for a road marathon. Then I found Dean Karnazes. I ate everything up that I could find about him, but his tactics did not fit my lifestyle. I couldn't, especially with babies, go on runs at midnight. And to be honest, I was terrified of the trails, animals, and the dark. Again, another story for another day. I didn't have a nanny. I didn't have like a consistent babysitter. And truly the only time we used family was to go out on a date. I mean, that's what you use babysitters for, is you kind of like saved up for when you asked a family member, can you watch your kids, to go and do something special together. So Eddie and I, we really cherished the time when our kids could be babysat, because that meant that we were able to spend time together and go on a date. So at this time, I was still running my own business, bringing in much needed income and figuring out how to be a good mama to a 1 and 3-year-old. Now, in the years prior, while learning how to train for a marathon, I had spent years studying every type of training plan I could find. So I figured that would be a good place to start. I used logic. I'm running 24 more miles than a marathon. So it's a 50-mile race. If I'm fit and fast, then maybe that'll transfer to duration. If I'm physically strong, that will translate to endurance, durability, and stamina. That's kind of like how I was thinking. Like, if I can't figure this out, then let's just like think about this distance and what do I really need to go this distance? So I figured, even if I'm really fit, obviously my pace is going to slow the more miles I'm running. I felt like, okay, that could transfer over. And it kind of made sense, with everything I had been reading. I just need to get as fit and strong as possible. I also knew that I needed to do a couple extra long runs to introduce my body to the stress, and really just for personal reasons. I wanted to feel what it felt like to go further than 26 miles and kind of work through that. So I tried my best to get the training in each day, but I'll be honest, I grew increasingly frustrated because I just didn't have help during the day. I was getting up every day at 4 a.m. I'd nurse Isaiah, and then I'd leave because none of my kids took bottles, pacifiers, or a finger. Like, it was just me. So I'd have to get up at 4, I'd nurse him, and then I'd leave, and I would be coaching clients by 5 a.m. And then I would be home by 6:45. Eddie would leave by 7:30 in the morning, and then I'd have the kids all day until, some days it was until 5:30, some days it was until 7. But, I'd work on the business during the day, play with the kids, clean the house, run errands, plan meals, social events, and really do my best to get the kids to nap each day. I'd have very full days. The days were very long. And for those of you with little babies, this at your core. The days are long and the years are short. So Eddie and I usually hung out after the kids went to bed, after you get home from work. And at this time, I was also writing a lot. I think I had begun my book for the second time at this point in my life. And so I would write a lot at night, and I would stay up late writing. I knew I needed to fit training in, but getting a 90-minute to 2-hour training block was only possible if I hired a sitter, which we did not have the extra funds for. And to a degree, I became a little bitter about my training. It's not anything I'm proud of, but I just felt like, man, I couldn't cut a break. I hated that I needed money to hire a sitter, to hire a coach or a personal trainer. I was also keenly aware of the research stating that my long runs were effective when done all at once, not broken up. I was also aware that strength training wasn't popular, and having a slim, light frame was ideal. I'd look at my schedule, and I'd look at my body in the mirror, and I'd tell myself, this is a joke. I'm a joke. My body and my life do not fit my passion. I have loved running since I was a little girl, genuinely loved it. But at the time, I felt like I had the wrong dream. And, this was just negative self-talk at the time. which is easy to do, especially when you feel like you're trying to make something work and it's not, or you're trying to force something into a season and it doesn't fit. And I talk to a lot of people who feel this way, who will tell me, gosh, Sally, the only way that I can train is if I do this and this. But, I hear that that's not the effective way to train, or coaches or this, amazing athlete says I have to do it like this. And I just feel like I'm doing it wrong. And that can be really frustrating. It's frustrating when people make you feel like that your training is lesser, or they make you feel like that you're wrong. And so I see a lot of people actually give up on their dreams, or they stop trying, and they'll tell themselves, I'll just do it in another season. I'll wait 5-10 years down the road when my kids are this age, or when I'm less busy, or when schedules have changed. And really, it's all based on someone else's opinion. And man, I feel that at my core, because I remember being there. I would tell myself, if I can't train the right way, then why train at all? If I don't look the part, then why try? You see, my goals were also not popular among mommy groups and other young women in the area. So, it wasn't uncommon for me to hear things like, what mom leaves her child with a sitter to go running? What wife tells her husband that she's heading out for a 30-mile run on a Saturday morning while he watches the kids? Who does she think she is? And then there's that voice in my head, like, come on, I'm 30 years old. Do I really think that I can still pursue a dream of becoming a professional athlete in my 30s with 2 little kids? I was starting to feel crazy, and I would feel irresponsible too. And this idea that I was being a bad mom because I was trying to make time to train, I was trying to make this goal work while running a business and raising children. One day, I remember this so vividly because it hit pretty hard. I was out on a training run on local trails. There was this little 7-mile out and back trail that I like to do right before I would make dinner. So Eddie would get home, and he would always encourage me, you want to go out for a run? Like, I got the kids. And so he'd watch the kids for an hour. And a lot of times it was like right before the sun was setting. So it was like my favorite time. And I ran into an old friend, someone I had not seen, I want to say, like in 5, 6, 7 years. And he was super stoked to see me. He's like, oh, what's up? So good to see you, Sally. I know I've been following you. I know you're training for that 50-miler. And I knew his wife, and they had 3 or 4 kids at the time. And he was really starting to get into running. He thought it was super cool. And he's like, I really want to do this running thing too. We have kids too. And, my wife says, like, I don't know how Sally can do it and still be a good mom. That just doesn't make any sense. I don't think that he realized the backhanded comment that he was making at the time. But what I understood was that the discussion was that he wanted to train for an ultra, and bringing me up just only made her say, like, how on earth can she actually be a good mom and do that? So our conversation ended a few minutes later, and I ran in one direction and he ran in the other. And I cried all the way back home, thinking about how, maybe I am a bad mom. Maybe it is wrong of me to try to make this work and still be there for my kids. So, I'd say that over the years, I've seen how I've lost friends in the pursuit of my dreams, especially as I become more successful, especially when I got signed. And I'm just going to be raw and vulnerable and say this, that is not uncommon. When you are pursuing a dream, when you have a goal that you're focusing on, and you are consistently and in a disciplined way showing up and training for it, it's, you're going to make other people feel uncomfortable. You're going to make other people feel insecure. And when people don't understand you, or your path, or it doesn't look like their path, or they feel like that you have left them out of your journey in any way, it's a lot of truth comes out about your relationships. And So I would just want to take a minute to encourage you in that, because I talk to a lot of people about that too. I mean, sometimes it's just right there in their home too, whether it's a parent or a spouse that isn't on board for the goal that you're chasing. And this isn't just in running. Sometimes when we are pursuing a dream, it can feel really lonely. And I think that as I have grown and as I have gone on throughout my career as a runner, I've really, really begun to appreciate those who have stuck with me my entire life and who have encouraged me every step of the way. It's not as big a group as I thought it would be, but man, those people are like gold. And I think that one of the biggest lessons that I learned is, and I have to take responsibility for this too, is I didn't always communicate right. I didn't, it's easy when people maybe question you or they criticize you or judge you to be defensive right away. Instead of having a discussion or helping someone else understand, because some people are genuine. Sometimes people can criticize you, but maybe they're making those comments because they want to know it's possible for themselves. Maybe they need a boost of confidence too. Maybe they're trying to figure it out for themselves, and maybe they're in a really rough place in life and they need encouragement. And sometimes when we're hurting, it's easy for us to hurt other people. And so, I've learned and I've grown from that a lot over the years. I look back on relationships that I've had or things that people have said that have hurt me, and I realize, maybe that person actually needed to be encouraged. Maybe the reason why they were so harsh towards me was because they were hurting in maybe their own failures or their own setbacks or their own challenges. And just the side of me working hard toward a goal was threatening to them, or just a reminder of what they had lost or what they had failed in. We are all trying to figure things out. We're all on our own journey, and none of us are perfect. None of us have it all figured out. As a coach for this long, I still don't have it figured out. As an athlete this long, I still don't have it figured out. And those early years were sometimes lonely. And so one of the most important things that I just want to encourage you in is be okay with having conversations, be okay with having uncomfortable conversations, and be good at listening. Be good at even inviting people in who might appear to be unsupportive or upset, but actually love and care about you. Have those conversations with them. I mean, at times, even Eddie and I in the beginning had hard conversations, because we grew up as soccer players. We met and fell in love in college as soccer players. And so when I started doing endurance running, it was like, what? This is so weird. This is so different. What's going on? And, at first I was offended, but I was figuring it out for myself too. And as the years went on, I realized at the root of all of the dream chasing, you need people around you, regardless of what it is, whether you're chasing a career goal or you're in school, building a family, whatever it is, you need people around you who love and support you, and you need to do the same for others as well. And so communication is key. Loving, good communication. And sometimes those conversations are hard, but, they're always worth it. And so I just want to encourage you, if you're in kind of that rough spot right now, you're trying to figure out this goal and juggle a lot. It's not supposed to look perfect. Not every day is smooth. You're going to have to sometimes approach it one day at a time, 1 week at a time. And then seasons change, and then you have a whole new schedule to work with. So, before I ran that 50-mile race, one of the things I did was I had to let go of my expectations. I had to let go of this bitterness and frustration that I couldn't train in the same way that everyone else was. I also had to discern and be gracious enough with myself to realize that even if experts and scientists and amazing athletes are telling me that I need to train this one way or that I'm doing it wrong, that it's okay to be courageous and carve my own path. So before I ran that 50-mile race, I sat down with a notebook one morning with my cup of coffee. I remember Isaiah climbing all over me and slobbering on my shirt while I was sitting on the couch. And I right then and there, I committed to a training plan that fit my life. Was it ideal from a coach's point of view? No. Did it look similar to the other successful runners in ultra running? Not even close. But I knew well enough, having started working and training at a young age, we need to carve our own path. It's okay to take risks. It's okay to courageously experiment with various training plans, schedules, and find out what works for you. You don't need anyone's permission to do that. My next point, science, research, and expert coaches are wonderful guides, but they should never be your dictator. I'm going to say that again. Science, research, and expert coaches are wonderful guides, but they should never be your dictator. When I first started endurance running, I knew very little about how to structure a training program. I was in debt, barely making ends meet. I bought one pair of running shoes every 6 months, and I wore them for everything. I wore them when I went to the gym. I wore them for long and short workouts. I bought my training clothes off the clearance racks and from thrift stores. And I only used sports nutrition on the weekends because it was so expensive. You know, I couldn't use it every day. So I saved it up for my long runs on the weekends. I had no money to hire a coach. And I would save up my money just to buy a book on running or training. Mostly, I would sit on the floor. There was a Barnes & Noble bookstore that was right across the street from our apartment. And I would read everything I'd find. Like I would go to the bookstore with a notebook. I would take notes. I loved to study. I loved to research. So I did a ton of research in those early days. So this is my encouragement to you. Study, research, and seek out the best information you can find. Take several different coaches and their perspectives. Discover various different training methods. You know, put all of those in account. Look at all of them. Don't just follow one way. You know, it's important that you allow yourself to discover everything you can about what you love. You have the freedom to search through the millions of articles, lectures, books, interviews, podcasts on training. There is a lot of incredible information out there. There's also a lot of trash out there. So it's important that you become a student and you stay a student. Here is what you will quickly learn. Science is great as a guide in reminding you of the most basic training principles that can actually be applied to every sport. And what those basic training principles are is that you need a couple hard training days a week. You know, you need a speed session and a long run. Hard days come in speed or intensity. The duration of your long run, it makes it intense, being on your feet for that long. Then you need mostly aerobic, easy days. So everything around that is pretty much easy running. You need to recover properly. You need good sleep. You need to feed your body. And then you need to strengthen and mobilize all your joints, you know, do those prehab exercises. You know what? You do all those things every week and you'll be on your way to crafting a strong and fit body. And I'll tell you what, that is pretty much what every training program is made up of. Those very basics. That's the skeleton of every great training program. Sure, there's some studies out there that might tell you the best ways to do speed training, when and how to do uphill training, and when and how to do downhill training. There's research on intervals, tempos. There's research on heat training, altitude training. But as you dig into that research, I want to encourage you, look at the actual study. Was the study done on thousands of people over the course of 10 years? Or was the study done on 5 people on a treadmill in a lab? What level of athletes were in the study? Were there men and women of all ages? Be careful of blanket statements that say, well, research shows, or even a scientist who says, well, I'm a scientist. Just because someone is a scientist or an expert coach doesn't mean they're all knowing in every area of study. There's been a lot of bad research out there, and I'm not just talking about in the area of sports performance. You, my friend, were given a powerfully complex and brilliant mind. So use it. Ask the questions, do the research, and pay close attention to the patterns that make a training program great. At the end of the day, even coaches who disagree with each other are all using a lot of the same principles to craft a training plan. Sure, some coaches will disagree on the duration of a long run or whether or not you should always put a workout inside a long run. Some coaches will tell you that you shouldn't lift weights or even do yoga. Others might say, hey, go to the gym 3 to 4 days a week, and maybe they'll tell you to swim one day instead of going for a run. Crafting a training schedule can seem complex, but that's only because we make it complex. Implement the basics, feed your body, get good sleep, and you'll be on your way to a good training plan. Now, my next point, I'm going to talk about critics and ugly comments. My friends, I have been criticized since I first entered the sport of endurance running, whether it was because I don't have the slim, petite build of a more commonly seen pro endurance athlete, the fact that I signed as a pro with 2 young kids, or because I've always lifted weights and refused to give that up. I'm used to it. And guess what? I'm still here, still training, still performing, and still carving my own way. Here's point number 3. You don't need anyone's permission to carve your own path. I'm going to say that one more time. You don't need anyone's permission to carve your own path. A few months ago, I saw a coach's post stating that he was back and ready to approve and disapprove other athletes and coaches. For a second, I thought he was joking, so I took a few minutes to read through the comments, and I was shocked. I was shocked to see people asking him, please approve me, approve me. I've been studying. I just got a coaching certification. And then there were the comments slamming other athletes and other coaches in the community. It was like this circle gang that had been developed. Now listen, this is no secret, but no human has the authority to approve or disprove you. Training and running is not our salvation. This is not a matter of morality. No one is going to suffer or lose their life or be led down a detrimental path because you choose to train this way or that. Furthermore, regardless if you have 100 certifications or if you are a scientist or like me have 3 decades of diverse experience, we will be wrong. We are not perfect, and we do not have all the answers. I constantly receive messages from people about how to train or if their training looks right. They literally ask me, am I doing this right? Or can you tell me what to do? I want to help everyone. But without taking the time to really listen and be thoughtful of each person who reaches out to me, my answers should always be taken lightly. I have no authority over anyone who reaches out to me. I have no authority over anyone's goals or to tell someone that they're right or wrong in their training. When I was a young mother, I had to let go of what traditional structured training programs told me I had to do and just be my best with what I had on that day. Most days, back then when my kids were babies, I had to train 2 to 3 times a day just to get the miles in. And I'm not talking about 2 to 3 hour sessions each time. I'm talking like 30 minutes here, 20 minutes there. I lived in my training clothes. And yeah, that sounds crazy, but not when you have a dream. Stuff like that only sounds crazy when you don't have a goal. It takes courage to carve your own path. It takes bravery to be okay with failing and getting it all wrong. But you will be stronger through those failures because that's how you learn. That's how you discover what works for you. That's how you discover what you're capable of. That's how you discover new ways of training too. There's so much we haven't tapped into. There's so much still that I believe that we're capable of. And you get to go and experiment on yourself. That's how we get better. My training looks very different than it did when my kids were babies, and it's always evolving. Week to week, it changes depending on my family's schedule and what I have going on with my business. My life as a pro athlete is wildly different from my competitors. I guess from an average competitor, to those who don't have kids, to those who maybe don't work jobs, they just focus on their training. We're all competitive, but our lives look different. I had someone make a comment one time about how much I work as if my contracts didn't allow me to train full time. I'm going to humbly say that my athletic contracts actually do allow me to train full time. and for me and my family to live comfortably. I actually don't need to hold additional jobs, but I choose to because I'm actually more passionate about helping and encouraging others than I am about my athletic endeavors. This is why I started coaching at age 14 and why I went on to be a teacher, why I went on to be a youth counselor, and why I eventually released an app. My goal has always been to help other people reach their goals. I love doing that. It's something I've always been passionate about. I love people. I love sitting in the front row and watching other people go after a dream. I love to encourage others. You know, I had a lot of incredible people in my life who selflessly helped me reach my goals. And I've always wanted to pay that forward. You know, I'm going to end this episode right here because I've talked about a lot of different points today that I hope you can take a few minutes to think about. I would love for you to do that after you're done listening. I really want you to think about your unique path that you're on. I'll be honest, I feel like our lives tend to go so fast. Like sometimes it feels like we're living in fast forward. I mean, can you believe it's already the middle of March? I can't. That we tend to forget about being thoughtful of our own journey. It's easy to not think that it's important to reflect on where we've come and where we're going. You have to do that. That's what helps you grow. It helps you see patterns in your life. It helps you learn from mistakes. It helps you learn to see what works. And I really want you to do that. I want you to take some time after this podcast and think about your journey and where you're going. Where in your life are you blocking yourself from trying because someone has made you feel like either you're not good enough, you're not doing it right, or you think you're going to fail? Where in your life do you feel maybe afraid to try because you feel like you don't have all the resources or you really cannot see how it's going to work? I want you to think about what it would mean to carve your own path to that dream that you're working toward. And I'm going to remind you this at the end too. But as I said in the beginning, my hope was to use this episode in whatever journey, you're on. This isn't about, running 100 miles. And maybe that is what you're training for, but really just whatever journey you're on. If you're a mama with 2 small kids and you're trying to make ends meet and you're trying to train for a half marathon, I see you. You're doing great. Go at your pace. Create a training program that fits you and you uniquely. Create a plan that you love, not one that makes you feel bad about yourself. If you're a college student and you're taking 18 units and you're working the night shift at the coffee house and you're feeling run down trying to figure out how to work on your goals, running or not, let me assure you, there is no right or wrong way to work on your goals. The only wrong thing to do is to abandon your goals. It's important that you believe in yourself and that you see yourself and your goals is valuable. Your path is valuable. Working on your goals for even 5 minutes each day is a step in the right direction. There is no time limit. I was 33 years old when I signed my first professional contract, an age where many athletes retire in the world of sports. I was just getting started. To most people around me, I was crazy, but I didn't pay attention to that. I believed and I worked hard, and it eventually paid off. It's okay if your goal takes you 10, 15, 20 years longer than how you envisioned or what society calls the norm. To all my listeners, you know that I care about you. I hear from a lot of you. And in the past few months, I have had the pleasure of meeting many of you at my speaking engagements and events. I have loved meeting you, and I'm picturing some of your faces right now as I sit here at the microphone. The goal of the Choose Strong podcast is to remind you of the strength inside you. Do you know that you are strong? Because you are. It's been there since day one. And sometimes you just need someone to remind you. So I'm doing that right now. You are strong. No matter where you are in your journey today, no matter where you are in your training or goal chasing, you are right where you are supposed to be. So embrace it. You don't need anyone's permission to live your life. And you certainly don't need anyone's permission to create a training plan or goal plan for your life. What you do need is to be a humble student, learn, research, listen, and use that wonderful mind of yours to discern what is best. You are not wrong in how you train, and you're not wrong if you want to try something new. Your life doesn't need to look like everyone else's, and your path doesn't need to mirror your heroes. But you do need to live your one unique life as best as you can. Because you know what? Only you can do that. Only you can live your life. I want to thank you for listening today. I'm reaching through the screen and I'm giving you a big bear hug, a big strong bear hug. I want to thank you for being here. You're doing great. Keep going. Keep choosing strong.